I'm kind of still in like a fog. I'm like, this isn't real. It's not gonna happen. Something's like, I'm gonna wake up eventually.
I'm Emily Vanderbeck, and I am the author of Crimson Time. It is a young adult historical fantasy.
I am Reilly. I am currently in the process of writing my debut novel, which is called All My Love from the Trenches. It's expected to publish in August of 2021, and it is a historical fiction.
And I am Marissa Miller, and I'm the author of a picture book called Chasing Figments, a middle grade book called The Grim and the Fantastic, and a young adult book called When Wicked Runs West. The purpose of this video is that the three of us, who are all at different stages of authoring and writing, are going to ask each other some general questions and ask each other some direct questions for each person.
All right, so my next one is what made you choose Dorothy Gale and Alice specifically? Which you kind of touched on this, but I feel like Alice is a character that's often like reworked and kind of reimagined. I mean, there's a million versions of Alice in Wonderland. One of Emily's kindred is a descendant of Lewis Carroll. Like, clearly Alice is a popular, but like Dorothy Gale is a little off kilter. Like, Wizard of Oz has only kind of been touched on a handful of times. So like, what made you choose those two specifically?
Interestingly enough, I actually hadn't read any of the Wizard of Oz books. I purely had just watched the movie. I just kind of like randomly got this wild hair of like, wouldn't it be cool if two people or like two girls who both went to like, you know, these alternate worlds or whatever met up? And then I don't really remember how Peter Pan got thrown in there too. But I'm like a big fan of Alice, and I've always really liked Alice in Wonderland. I love the Disney movie version of it. I have read, you know, like the books and the poems and stuff. So, and then Dorothy was kind of just like Wizard of Oz, something to do with like the signpost and the four directions and stuff. And I was just like, what if, you know, instead of it being just Oz, what if we like took in some other worlds and made this like that be, you know, West is Wonderland, East is Oz, South is Neverland and stuff. And then I had a friend, Shannon, she actually started out writing it with me because I was like, hey, we should write a book together. And I was like, I'll write Alice's chapters because I love her. Like, would you like to write Dorothy's chapters? And we'll just send them back and forth to each other and just build off of like, so I wrote chapter 1 and I sent it to her. She read it and then wrote chapter 2, and then I'd read chapter 2. And so then we were building off, like, it was almost like a weird writing prompt game. And then it kind of grew from there. And then that actually piqued more of an interest in the Wizard of Oz world and stuff. So yeah, I guess there isn't like a super like profound answer. And then I ended up getting a lot more immersed in it after the fact.
So you already kind of write in children's literature and then almost edging into like middle grade. But would you ever consider writing outside of those genres? And if so, what would you like that to be or look like?
Yes, I actually started out writing more like young adult or like adult fiction, fantasy stories and stuff, but I had a really bad problem with never finishing them or like write myself into a corner. It was before I used any sort of plotting and stuff too. So I ended up writing Chasing Figments because of a class. It was a creative writing extra credit assignment to write a one-act play thing. And that's what it started out as. And then a writer or an author friend of mine told me that like I needed to make it into a kid's book. And so that's what I did. And then everything just flowed so much easier with that initially that I was like, maybe I've been doing the wrong demographic and I should focus on children's books. Like maybe that's what I should do. Children's books are a really hard market. So that is definitely like tricky as far as like doing like debut works is in that market, but I still have multiple projects going at like all times. And so I have like a novella that I'm working on intermittently that actually is from the perspective of an old man. That's going to be a fantasy thing and stuff. I have like another one that I would like to be in like an adult fantasy, but it might span more into young adults. When Wicked Runs West, the first one, well, When Wicked Runs West, the West book, was more like middle grade into young adult, and I'm hoping that the next subsequent books will go into young adult. So yes, I wouldn't say that my genre is really expanding, but I do think that I will continue to do at least stories like with fantastical elements in them. For my goal is to do it in all ranges, because I went from picture book to middle grade book to like young adult book, and then originally my plan was to do an adult book afterwards so I could have one in each demographic. But due to popular demand, I'm working on the sequel for When Wicked Runs West.
So my next one is, which of your books was the hardest for you to write and why?
Writing wise, I think I'll say The Grim and the Fantastic was the trickiest because of the cancer element, because I have not had cancer. My family members have, and then a friend of mine has. And so I interviewed her. I wanted to make sure that I was being respectful, since it wasn't something that I had gone through personally. And so I like ran everything by her. But I did do a lot of like interview process, and in doing that, and trying to make sure and like run things by her and make sure it wasn't coming off any sort of bad way.
What growth have you seen in yourself, in your writing, however you want to answer that, but from one book to the next, since you've got a few under your belt?
I got a bit more confidence, I think, with each subsequent book, feeling like, okay, here's another one, I'm doing another one. And then writing wise, I think that I have grown, again, kind of like largely in confidence, because I've been a writer for like a long time, or a storyteller, from before I could write. I think just feeling more confident in the fact that like, if I enjoy reading my story, then that is good enough for me, I guess. Like, I have to have confidence in myself that if I enjoy it, that's probably a good sign, because like I'm a little bit of a picky reader. So, and I'm really hard on myself. So I feel like I'm not biased about reading my own stories. So then just being like, okay, someone else should like this book, and, it should resonate with someone else. And I have a hard time of feeling like confidence is egotistical and stuff. So working on that balance of being like, no, like I'm proud of this and that's okay, and not feeling like I'm being like a braggart.
So you've already talked about this a little bit, but can you tell us about your When Wicked Runs series? And did you approach writing that different than you approached like your individual novels or children's books? And if so, in what ways did that process kind of look different?
The process with writing that first book was interesting because it went through like about 4 entirely different versions. This is the first series that I've done. So going about, like, the other 2 are standalones. So like going about the series thing is like to plan an overarching plot line, or like plot points vaguely, and then also have the more detailed plots of each book. So I'll get like kind of these little epiphanies about things I can include in the story as I'm writing like a certain part, and I'll like write it down on a post-it note and like stick it up. And then I go back and I like make a full list of like these details and stuff. So sometimes I can find things that'll loop back, but then like also with one being published, I have to like make sure that I go back and be like, okay, West is done, it's set, it's out, I can't change anything about West. So I had to like plan the type of reveals that I want to do, because I have the big plot thing, but I'm trying to like plan, okay, I have these things that I want to reveal and have them be like the gasp type moments, but okay, how many of these do I want to go in book 1? How many do I want to go in book 2? Because it's meant to be 4 books, and stretching it out along there. So the planning process is definitely very different and a lot more intensive, as I'm sure you know, Emily, because you're doing a series, and like having to check back and be like, okay, I want to make sure I don't have any of those annoying plot holes, and like I'll be like, and not only that, but I'm also like, this was the like found my own version of the book to begin with.
Oh, awesome.
And so I am utilizing, because I wrote basically what would go into actually book 3, just really vaguely. And then I was like, I'm writing myself into a corner. This isn't working. So I went back and cut off chapters and was like, this is book 1. They're all in Wonderland. I'm going to cut it off here before they go into Oz. And then Oz will be book 2. And then there are like a couple pieces where they're in Neverland. And I'm like, nope, that's going to go in book 3. So I do have to go back and reference sometimes in the original that had this to get those plot points that I wanted. And then I have to go back into West as like the actual published West as well. So there's a lot of like flipping around and being like, okay, what did I say there? And like, what does this say? And like, did they phrase it this way or did they just think that? And doing all that and keeping it organized.
Yeah, as I've been writing, I have Crimson Time on my desk, easily accessible, ready to flip through whenever I need something. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Reilly, what is your biggest aspiration as a writer and why?
I think, well, it's really funny because I think my biggest aspiration for so long has just been to write a book and publish it. So now that I'm like in that process, like I literally got like greenlit yesterday. Now that I'm like fully in that process, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like when you graduate college and you're like, so what do I do now that I'm not a student? I've been a student my whole life. What do I do now?
Yeah.
But like in a good way. So, I mean, I definitely don't want this to be the only book I write. I would love to do this full time and this be the only thing I do. But yeah, I mean, I think my aspiration is really kind of to finish this book and to do it and to enjoy it. And I think kind of anything that comes after it, I'm just like taking as a blessing. Because I mean, this has been the goal for so long that I'm kind of still in like a fog. I'm like, this isn't real. It's not gonna happen. Something's like, I'm gonna wake up eventually. So yeah, I think I'm kind of living my biggest aspiration right now because I don't think I want to make this enormous goal for myself. Like, oh, I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. Like, I don't want to make this big lofty goal that makes writing like a chore for me. So I think I'm kind of living the aspiration and I'm just gifted whatever happens next and whatever comes after.
Why did you choose to focus your first book on World War I?
Okay. Well, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I think it was just because I'm very interested in the First World War. I love the early 1900s time period. But I also thought that there was just like a lot that isn't touched on because I mean, I think maybe most adults can list maybe like 3 facts about World War I that we like learned in high school, and that's kind of the extent of our knowledge. Which, I mean, now granted, that was like a lot of the extent of my knowledge until I started researching more and then decided I wanted to tell a story. But I think so much change came out of it that I really wanted to create a story within this like huge moment, because it just so much came out of it. I mean, the 20s happened because this war was so traumatic. Like, it was literally like they were trying to forget everything. So I mean, this war inspired, Hemingway and Fitzgerald and so many authors that are brilliant and we love. And I mean, PTSD was discovered because of this war, and so much creation came out of this war. Like, if you've read any World War I poetry, it's like hauntingly gorgeous. I just thought it was just such an interesting time period, and it was like such a catalyst for a lot of different moments that I just really wanted to work in it because I just thought it was really, really cool.
A good answer. Remember to keep an eye out for the next segment of our video. If you're interested in staying up to date with Marissa, Reilly, or Emily's writing and authoring endeavors, you can find our information here.
We'll just edit that.
Yeah, we'll just cut that out.